At some point in your life, have you felt like you're inside a maze? But it's not an ordinary maze, with stone walls and dark passageways. It's an invisible labyrinth, built with preconceived ideas, useless habits, and unquestioned beliefs. No matter how much you progress, you always end up in the same place, going in circles. Now imagine that the only way out is to see the maze for what it really is and decide to stop walking in circles. This is precisely what Dietrich Bonhoeffer understood about stupidity. It's not simply a lack of intelligence, but a mental trap that prevents us from growing and evolving. Bonhoeffer describes stupidity as an enemy more dangerous than evil itself. While evil acts consciously, with clear and calculated intentions, stupidity operates unconsciously. The stupid person does not question themselves, does not doubt, does not analyze. They simply follow the path others have laid out for them, without asking whether it's the right one or if it leads to a desirable destination. It's easy to think that intelligence is enough to avoid falling into this trap, but the reality is more complex. History is full of brilliant individuals who have fallen into stupidity when they allowed social pressure, fear, or comfort to dictate their thoughts and actions. One of the most devastating effects of stupidity is that it makes us manipulable. At first glance, we might believe that only people with little knowledge are vulnerable to manipulation, but Bonhoeffer warns us that intelligence alone does not protect us from this. What truly makes us immune is the ability to think critically. Without it, anyone, regardless of their level of education or IQ, can become a pawn in a game they don't even understand. Accepting without questioning, repeating without reflecting, obeying without analyzing the consequences. These are the traps we fall into when we allow others to think for us. This kind of stupidity not only makes us vulnerable to external manipulation but also locks us in an internal prison where learning and reflection are unnecessary. The stupid person, according to Bonhoeffer, feels satisfied with their beliefs, not because they've arrived at them through a process of deep analysis, but because they find them comfortable. Questioning them would mean facing uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. That's why we often prefer to remain in ignorance rather than admit we might be wrong. We close ourselves off to new ideas, resist changing our minds, and in doing so, condemn ourselves to a life of stagnation. The problem is that without self-criticism, without the ability to recognize our mistakes, growth becomes impossible. When we believe we're always right, we stop evolving. Self-criticism is not an exercise in self-flagellation but an indispensable requirement for personal improvement. It allows us to identify our weaknesses, correct our mistakes, and become more advanced versions of ourselves. But stupidity robs us of this opportunity. It blinds us to our own flaws and, worse, gives us the false sense that we're right even when we're wrong. This doesn't just affect us on an individual level. Bonhoeffer pointed out that stupidity is the foundation upon which oppressive systems are built. Authoritarian regimes don't need to convince everyone of their ideology. It's enough for a majority of people to accept it without question. History has shown that when people stop thinking for themselves, power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few who dictate what is acceptable and what is not. The lack of critical thinking not only enslaves us personally but also allows the world we live in to become less free. Beyond large political and social systems, this tendency also manifests in our daily lives. We follow trends without asking ourselves if we truly like them. We adopt values we haven't even analyzed. We repeat phrases we don't fully understand. All because it's easier to fit in with what the majority thinks than to stop and reflect on what we truly want or believe. Stupidity makes us resistant to change, and change is precisely what we need to grow. It's curious how, even though we all want to improve our lives, we often resist what could help us do so. We prefer the comfort of the familiar, even if it limits us. We cling to outdated ideas, toxic relationships, and destructive habits simply because they're familiar. Personal growth, on the other hand, requires adaptation, exploration, and the willingness to let go of what no longer serves us. But stupidity makes us fear change, because change means uncertainty, and uncertainty terrifies us. So, how do we escape this maze? Bonhoeffer was clear that stupidity cannot be combated with logical arguments. It's not about providing more information, presenting more data, or making more elaborate speeches. The problem with stupidity isn't a lack of information but the inability to process it critically. The only way to overcome it is by helping people regain their autonomy of thought, promoting reflection, curiosity, and intellectual independence. This means learning to question, to doubt, to challenge our own beliefs when necessary. It means having the courage to admit when we're wrong and the humility to learn from those who think differently. There's no magic formula to avoid falling into stupidity, but there are habits that protect us from it. Asking why things are the way they are instead of accepting them without question. Listening to different viewpoints not with the intent to refute them but to understand them. Admitting when we don't know something instead of pretending we do. Surrounding ourselves with people who challenge us intellectually rather than those who simply confirm what we already believe. All of these are ways to train our minds to resist the temptation of intellectual comfort. Escaping the maze of stupidity is a difficult task because it means giving up the security of the familiar. But it's a necessary task if we want to live authentic lives, grow as individuals, and contribute to a world where critical thinking is the norm rather than the exception. Stupidity traps us when we stop thinking. Freedom, on the other hand, begins the moment we decide to start. Stupidity, as Bonhoeffer described it, is not a lack of intelligence but an absence of critical thinking that prevents us from growing. Below, we'll share 5 easy tips to free ourselves from it. First, develop the habit of questioning everything. Stupidity thrives on the blind acceptance of ideas and norms without analyzing them. When we stop asking ourselves why things are the way they are, we become passive followers. A good exercise is to start with the everyday. Why do I believe what I believe? Is this opinion truly mine, or did I inherit it without evaluating it? For example, if you've always thought you're bad at math because someone told you so in childhood, challenge that idea by taking a course or solving small daily problems. You'll discover that many of our limiting beliefs have no real foundation. Second, listen to different points of view with an open mind. Stupidity flourishes when we isolate ourselves in bubbles where we only hear from those who think like us. To break free from this, we need to expose ourselves to diverse opinions, even those we disagree with. A good exercise is to read books or articles by authors with ideologies different from our own. For example, if you have deeply held convictions about a topic, try reading an opposing argument without the immediate intent to refute it. The goal isn't to change your opinion but to understand how others think and strengthen your reasoning skills. Third, recognize when we're wrong and accept corrections. One of the most evident symptoms of stupidity is the inability to admit mistakes. We all make errors, but only those who can acknowledge them can learn and improve. A classic example is a leader who makes a poor decision but insists on defending it out of pride. In contrast, a wise leader listens to their team, evaluates the situation, and adjusts their course when necessary. Applied to daily life, if a friend or colleague points out a mistake, instead of reacting defensively, analyze their perspective. This will not only make you smarter but also more respected by those around you. Fourth, step out of your comfort zone and face the fear of change. Stupidity keeps us trapped in the familiar, even when we know it doesn't benefit us. To grow, we must dare to venture into the unknown. This could mean learning a new skill, moving to a different city, or simply changing your daily routine. For example, if you've been in a job that doesn't fulfill you for years but stay out of fear of uncertainty, it might be time to explore new opportunities. The discomfort of change is temporary, but the reward of growth is permanent. Finally, cultivate curiosity and constant learning. Willful ignorance is one of the most dangerous forms of stupidity. We should never take for granted that we already know enough. A useful strategy is to learn something new every day, whether through books, documentaries, courses, or conversations with people from different fields. An example of this is someone who has always felt that philosophy isn't for them but decides to read a thinker like Socrates and discovers that their ideas can be applied to daily life. Curiosity keeps us awake and protects us from stagnation. Breaking the cycle of our own stupidity requires effort and courage, but every small step in the right direction moves us away from passivity and closer to personal growth. If we start by questioning our beliefs, opening ourselves to new ideas, accepting our mistakes, stepping out of our comfort zone, and maintaining a commitment to constant learning, we will be building a freer and more powerful mind.